This edition of the Z Files is on a special road trip. We're in the warehouse for the Okaloosa County Supervisor of Elections, and we refer to this little area as a museum display area that was set up just so we could do this video with Paul Lux. Paul, good afternoon or good morning, depending on what time somebody's watching this.
Absolutely. Good to see you again, Cal.
Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to give you a chance to see just about one of every kind of voting machine that Okaloosa County has used, and one that they've never used, which is the one here on my left, which is from Palm Beach County, Florida. And when we get to that one, we'll tell you some about it and the history of it and that election that happened 16 years ago. And after I've looked up some of the numbers, and then seeing what Paul's going to show us, I can see how a fellow who never even campaigned in that county got enough votes, 3,000 plus votes. Everywhere else he was getting in the hundreds. But and there's a reason why that could have happened, we're going to have to say. But anyway, we're going to go from machine to machine to machine. And our first one we're going to sign on it is the most current, newest thing that you've got, which I'm sure is the one that has worked. We saw in the primary, it was fast.
That's right. By 20 minutes after 7, all 52 precincts had reported their results into us. We were actually waiting on additional absentee ballots from the South County to be couriered up to us. That was the delay. But by 10 o'clock, I was home on my couch on August 30th. So to me, that's a really good, successful election. You know, I gauge it by what time I get home.
Okay. Well, maybe in November it can be a little bit later.
Oh, yeah. I rather anticipate that we'll still be working very hard up into the wee hours on November 8th.
And November 9th, maybe.
And November, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
All righty. Now we're standing by the current 2016, the newest equipment for Okaloosa County. So, Paul, let's tell them what this is, what we've got here.
Well, so this first device we're looking at, this is the ES&S AutoMark system. So this is a device that allows voters, regardless of disability, the ability to vote their ballot in private and without any assistance. So you can see we have headphones back here. You can see that there's a keypad right here. So if a voter is totally blind, they'll still be issued the same paper ballot you and I will get. When they insert the paper ballot, the machine will pull it up on the screen. The screen can be darkened for privacy, and then they can have the entire ballot read to them through their headphones, and they make their selections. And what this really is a big, expensive pen, because all this has in it is an inkjet printer, and it goes around and it fills in their ovals, and then it spits their ballot out, and then it goes in the same tabulator that all the rest of the ballots go into. So whether a voter, maybe they cannot read English but can understand spoken English, if they have literacy issues, they can still have the ballot read to them and see it on the screen. If they just maybe are a little bit shaky with their hands and can't fill in tiny ovals, they can use the touch screen interface and mark their ballot this way. So that's really all this is a ballot marking device. Of course, the 2002 Help America Vote Act required all polling places and early voting sites to have some type of ADA accessible equipment available for voters. This is it's actually as old as the old touch screens that we got rid of. The difference for this one is it marks the same paper ballot everybody gets so that all of our voters have that paper record.
Okay. Now, so for a handicap, it's sitting low, and then it's up a little bit higher if it's in a booth for people to use it?
Actually, this is mainly for voters with disabilities. Okay. So it would sit just like it is here on a table, probably with a chair. If the chair needs to be moved for someone in a wheelchair, we can accommodate that, of course. But it faces, actually, you're looking at it the way the voter would see it. For privacy, it would actually be turned around, and then the voter would be with a wall behind them so that they're not, out where everybody can see what they're doing.
Okay. But then they are higher for the people who are walking in.
Well, like I said, these are mainly used for people with disabilities, and most of them prefer to sit, because if you're listening to the audio ballot, it takes a lot longer to have the ballot read to you than it does.
The other person's just marking a ballot in a booth.
Exactly, and I'll show you when we get around to the old punch card booths.
Yeah.
That's actually what we did, was we converted our old punch card booths with a piece of tile board over into the booths that people stand in and fill in their ballots in today. I didn't put one of those up because it really is the exact same booth from the data vote era. We just put a piece of tile board in it to save money, and we're still using those same voting booths that we bought all the way back then.
Okay, well, while we're standing there, you've got some papers you put out to show us there, and we can pull the lens back enough to maybe show those. You've got some 1917 election paperwork here. Describe what you've got.
That's right. So what this is this is actually the precinct report from, I've got a couple of precincts here, so it looks like I have precinct 10 and I have precinct 16. Back then that was Mary Esther, and precinct 10 was still, this says Howell, Florida. I'm not sure that I've ever heard that we had a town or an area called Howell, but that's what's written on here. Maybe it's Harwell. But you can see that that this is literally the report, and I have some other versions of it where you can see the election board down here has actually used tick marks where they counted the ballots, and this is all that we used to get back then in 1917. They hand-marked paper ballots, and they tabulated them right there in the polling place. The election board that was on duty signed it. And then this was the report of the election. It came back to us in these lovely little sealed envelopes. And so these are from the special road and bridge election from July of 1917.
So that was after the county had been formed in one of its early elections.
That's right. And the other thing I have here is a couple of samples of what our old paper ballots used to look like. So prior to any of this electronics and machinery getting involved, as I always tell the students when I'm talking to them, you know, we did hand-counted paper ballots, and there's a lot of different varieties. So these are from looks like a primary election in 1924. So you can see that this is again, this is some sort of ballot measure. And so you can just see that it's simply, you know, here's the to create road and bridge district, embracing the following districts. So you can see that these are just some samples of ballots from some of those precincts from 1924. So it may be that previous one over here, which was from 1917. Maybe that election didn't go as planned, and so they had to go and have another attempt at it. So we do have these paper ballot results from there as well. So we do have a lot of really interesting historical information. This is already set on this nice backdrop because back in 2012 they allowed us to set up a display at the Heritage Museum in Valparaiso with a lot of this information, and so some of it is all still fixed onto backboards and stuff from those displays. But we had most of this stuff set up, minus of course the Palm Beach County machine, which wasn't part of our history here in Okaloosa County, thank goodness. But I'll show you the difference between our punch card system that we used and of course the punch card system that is now infamous from Palm Beach County.
Okay. Now you've got part of the system that you use in your office to tabulate sitting over here, right?
That's right. So like I said, the ballots from this AutoMark are all marked on the same paper,
right.
Same paper ballot you and I get, and then all those ballots go into one of these tabulators right here.
So each precinct has one of these.
So every precinct or early voting site has one of these, and they literally, you can see right there, insert ballot here, it's going to go straight in there, and then all the ballots get commingled, my ballots, your ballots, and ballots that are marked on the AutoMark. Inside each one of these machines is a modem that cellularly contacts our office, which is what makes it go so gosh darn fast. All the poll workers have to do is press the button that says close polls, and it automatically starts the modem process. It prints the results tape out on this piece of paper, modems the results, and then the thumb drive that's sealed in here, that's secure, that thumb drive comes back to our office on election night, and that's how we get all the results in.
So then there's a print report here that the officials of the precinct will all sign off on.
That's right. At the beginning of the morning, the first tape that the machine prints has our zero report. At the end of the day, of course, it lists the results. We print 2 copies of those results. One copy stays attached to the zero tape, so I have a complete record of the election from the precinct. The other copy gets posted on the polling place door. So a lot of people say, what's the quickest way to find out how the voting went? Well, have one person at each of the 43 polling locations to read the tapes on all 43 doors. That's the fastest way.
So this is 2016 until how many years do you think this stuff is going to be good for?
Well, you know, as advertised, this stuff typically is designed to last anywhere between 10 and 15 years. So hopefully this will see us through certainly on into on into 2030.
Okay, Paul, now we're at the system that you've had for quite a few years, and it has just been retired. Let's talk about this one. What era did this system cover?
So these machines, these are what we call the touchscreen voting machines, and when we initially deployed them, this was when we first started doing off-site early voting outside of our office in 2006. Again, remember I mentioned with the AutoMark, the 2002 Help America Vote Act required all precincts to have at least one device available for voters with disabilities to vote without assistance. So you can see that it's kind of the same thing. There's a touchscreen interface here. There's a keypad for voters who need to navigate because they cannot see to touch the screen. Headphone jack, again, just like that, has headphones so that the voters can hear the ballot read to them. It accommodates everything except that this one only generates an electronic record. So there is no paper record voter by voter that the voter can see to verify, which was one of the points that detractors of the touchscreen voting technology kept bringing up, was how does the voter verify this? This particular version has the Diebold name on it, which of course is now almost nearly as infamous as the machine we're getting ready to look at as it comes to the butterfly ballots. But Diebold purchased the company that we purchased the other piece of this equipment with, and this is the AccuVote tabulator. So this machine was purchased in our county back in 1997. The first election we used it in was 1998, and then I came to the elections office in 99. So we already had this equipment long before the 2000 election, had already used it in at least one round of elections, so it was not new and foreign to us or our voters. So it's the same optical scan ballots that you're used to seeing, only the ovals are slightly bigger than they are on our new equipment. But you fill in the oval, you put it in the machine, and it drops it in and it tabulates it. These also had modems inside of them, but these modems had to be plugged into a phone line, and one of the problems with this as we got closer to the end of life for these was that most people were bundling their services to save money, and digital phone lines do not work with the analog modems that are in these machines. So the old 9600 baud modems, for those of us who remember what the heck that even means, that's what's in here, is an old 9600 baud modem. And the modems that it talked to in our office were the 14.4 Sportster modems. So all of this stuff was fairly antiquated, but quite reliable. But the reason I approached the commissioners, and I had been warning them for years that day was coming, and in the 2015-16 budget cycle, I told them it was time to rip off the Band-Aid, because we had an election where, just because of age, about 20% of our machines failed in precinct, and to me that number is just a little higher than my comfort level going into a big presidential election year. To counterbalance that with the new equipment that we just finished looking at, I can tell you that we have had exactly one actual machine failure in the new equipment, and we've used it in 2 county-wide elections now. And so the new equipment is much more reliable and works a whole lot faster than this stuff ever did.
And that machine would just be the machine that would tabulate the ballot when it was pushed in after the voter had filled it in.
That's right, and that's all this is the tabulator. What this one does that the new one does not is this has 3 layers inside the ballot box. If I could show you real quick just for fun. So this ballot box actually had three compartments. And this middle compartment is where, if somebody voted a write-in ballot and filled in the oval, it would turn that baffle so that their ballot fell into the middle compartment instead of mixed in with all the rest of the ballots. The new equipment doesn't do that, because what the new equipment does is it actually takes a digital picture of the ballot as it's being scanned, and if there's a write-in, it captures that specific area of the ballot where the voter wrote, and we can download all of those files and look at them up on the screen in our canvassing board room to adjudicate write-in ballots, rather than digging through looking for pieces of paper that have writing on them. So much more efficient, much more time friendly, and all the new stuff is. So this stuff we used from, like I said, we bought it in 97, first used it in 98, and we used it through all of our municipal elections in 2015. But it was out the door when we bought the new stuff come October of 16.
Now we are standing next to one of the infamous Palm Beach County votomatic machines that had the hanging chads, and actually down in the bottom of the thing there are some of those little chads. I know that
there are still chads falling out of it, actually, and probably will be for some time to come. But of course, this whole bottom piece of this, that's where the chads were meant to fall. So, but yeah, eventually you do have to clean them out, and of course they clean them out between elections. But the people who purchased these as collectibles after the 2000 election, this is how Palm Beach helped fund their conversion to optical scan and touch screen, was by selling all of their infamous machines with the butterfly ballot still in it to people. As you and I have talked, I have a friend in the south end of the county who purchased a couple of these after that on eBay, and when his wife was encouraging him to clean out his garage, he knowing I'm the political junkie that I am, was kind enough to gift me with one of his two Palm Beach County machines. You can see that when they sold them, they came with a nice little plaque to let you know that this was used in that November 7th, 2000 election. It came with a little envelope, certificate of authenticity, a picture of the canvassing board autographed by all the canvassing board members, along with a supply of test ballots for demonstration purposes, so you can kind of see what some of the controversy was about. Now, we of course used punch cards in our county from about 1991 on through when we purchased these in 1997. So we didn't have punch cards for very long, but our system, as you will see, vastly different, and in my opinion much better than the system they were using in Palm Beach as far as the usability from the voter is concerned.
Okay, well, we're going to want to get some close-up shots in here next, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to move the camera in tight and actually let you see how easy it was for someone to make some of the mistakes that obviously, I mean, anybody would have to look and say, gosh, I can see how that could have happened.
What's interesting about the way their system works, so they have to have a booklet of their ballot, because you'll notice that their ballot is just divided into this many columns, and so each one of these columns, that's how many contests they can accommodate on this ballot. And that's why
how many different candidates.
Exactly, and that's why the larger counties went with this variety of punch card rather than the one that we use, because on our version you had to receive multiple cards as a voter, and so in those large counties it probably would have meant having to give them somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 15 computer cards to go with each ballot. So I can understand why they did what they did. And so you can see it clearly tells you on their voting instructions, you're going to put your card in, and you're going to make sure that the little red pins go on there. But I want to show you, because it's easy to see, and you'll probably have to zoom in really tight here. But you'll notice it right now, this little stylus, there's a plastic cover over all of these holes that are available. But once you slide the card in and you push it, so right here is where the card stops, and as soon as you see that I push it to where the red pins attach, now there's a hole in each of those holes. So that was the trick, was number one, your card had to be fully inserted so that these holes were available for the punching stylus to be used to punch out the chads. And so you can see from this,
and they called it chips for
and they call it chips on their instructions. So you can see that as you go from page to page of the ballot, it's moving over a column. Now we're in column B of the card, and the numbers are 21 through 36. And then as we turn over again, now we're at 45, and you notice that we're not even using anything in column D. And then this one, we're using just some at the bottom. So I don't know what the rhyme or reason was for how they rearranged these things as they printed them. But you can see that as you go through, it's moving you over one column at a time, so that you're only punching in those races, in those areas where you have places to punch and races to vote on. And even their ballot measures took up, pages themselves. And this, it looks like this is actually installed a little backwards. It says to start voting, turn back to page 1. That message is kind of facing the wrong direction. So the controversy then, of course, here with the Bush v. Gore race, and that's where all the controversies came from. So you notice that this is one race with candidates printed on both sides of the ballot, thus the term butterfly. So you'll notice that the first 6 candidates are all in the first column, and then the remaining candidates in the race are down right-hand column. But in order to make the ballot easier for the voter to read, so if you look at a crowded race like this, even with just single names, you will notice that this print is a little bit smaller than the print we've got over here and the spacing that we've put out. So what Teresa Lepore did with her ballot design, and this is not an uncommon ballot design, by the way, for people who use this kind of system. All across the United States, butterfly ballots were not a new thing that she invented. People had been using them in jurisdictions all over the United States, and most people don't know this about Teresa. She was the she had worked in the supervisor's office from the age of 17 as a high school intern, went away to college, came back and worked in the office for decades before becoming supervisor. So she knew that even in Palm Beach County, they had in previous elections deployed a butterfly style of ballot before. So it was not really anything new. She did present the ballot design to both political parties to show them that what she was doing, to explain to them she was doing it so that the print could be larger, to make it easier for people with low vision to read. They all thought that was a great idea, right up until November 8th, actually.
Maybe the night of the 8th, or the next day.
And so you can see then that to vote for George Bush, you're punching hole number 3. But to vote for Al Gore, the second candidate, you're actually punching hole number 5. And that skipped hole number 4 in the middle belongs to Pat Buchanan from the Reform Party, a much more conservative candidate than virtually anyone else on the ballot, and one would presume not one that would have gotten a lot of votes in a place like Palm Beach County in 2000.
And actually, Ralph Nader, who was down at number 9 button, got more votes than Buchanan did, and he got 90,000 votes statewide.
Yep. So you can see then from this ballot design, that's where they say that the voters who were confused, a lot of people were told, or anecdotally at least, I had heard that people were being told, go in and vote for the second person, which would of course be Al Gore. But if you came in and punched the second hole, you weren't voting for Al Gore, you were voting for Pat Buchanan.
Yeah, and there'll be a chart up on the screen when you're watching this. Pat Buchanan got 20% of his total statewide vote just in this county, a county he never even campaigned in. He did have a campaign office in Pinellas County, and you'll see that that was his second largest, where he got 1,700 votes there, but he had over 3,000 votes in Palm Beach County. Yep. And so, 25% of his vote statewide came from just those two counties. So that can say, okay, a lot of people went down here and they hit that second little hole rather than the third one. But how are you going to know what their intent was? And of course, there are also cases on any one of these ballots, or even on the regular ones, that can't happen anymore, overvoting. Now your system catches an overvote.
Exactly.
But in this day, you did no way to catch an overvote.
If you had punched number 2 for Buchanan, and then you went, oh, wait a minute, that's not Al Gore, and then you went and punched Al Gore, you've just made 2 holes in your card in that race, and so yeah, you've just overvoted that race. The problem is, and again, the Help America Vote Act fixed this, so these ballots, when you're done, get pulled out, the stub gets detached, and then they go into this ballot box that we have down here, and they just get dropped in the box. And then they get counted at a central count facility later. So you, the voter, are not given an opportunity to correct errors on these cards before you leave the polling place. And that was another thing that the Help America Vote Act said, was all voting in federal elections shall be done in a manner in which the voter has an opportunity to correct mistakes before they leave the precinct. So the vocabulary of elections changed as a result of this, as you well know. As a result of this, we got to hear all kinds of new terms: hanging chads, swinging chads, dimpled chads, pregnant chads, etc. And I don't know that you're going to be able to see it on camera, but I have a card here. And again, it's just one of these test cards, but I actually dimpled one of these chads. So looking at it on the face, of course, you can't really see it. But if you look on the back from the right angle, you can see that one chad is barely punched out there. So it almost broke the chad loose, but it didn't exactly. And of course, on a machine that reads these, for those of us who remember the punch card days, it's just got little metal fingers in each of these columns, and it's looking for contact when the little metal finger hits the metal plate under it when the card goes through, and that way it knows where the holes in the card are. And so a dimpled chad like this that might indicate a voter intended to punch this chad out doesn't actually read when the machine reads the card. And so that's what a dimpled Chad looks like. I don't know how much further it would have to go out to be a pregnant Chad from being dimpled. I don't know, but there you go.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about Okaloosa County's version and many other counties' versions of a punch card machine. And what was the brand name on this one?
This one is called the Data Vote system. So like I said, if you look at when you go vote, you look at those blue voting booths that we use, and you will see that the little Data Vote tag is probably still on them.
Yeah.
And all we did was covered up this hole right here with a big piece of tile board, and so that we can continue using these same voting booths for just using it to mark optical scan ballots on. So this is a slightly older version of booth. We had several varieties. I think we actually bought these from another county. But you can see that our system has you can see that the ballots in our system don't have any pre-perforated holes on the ballot. So unlike that system over there, which had perforations to make it easier to punch the Chads out, ours actually has a sharp blade inside that cuts a hole into the card, so you don't have to worry about is it perforated enough to come out or not. This one actually has a razor blade that's chopping a hole in the card as you go. And the difference between theirs and ours is you can see when you look at our card that the candidate names are printed on it. So you would have had, like I said, you would have been given multiple copies of the card. So you can see now this is just a short little Republican primary ballot from 1996. And so that was the end of the ballot, so you only got one card. But if you had a card where, if you had a long general election ballot, you might have gotten 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 of these cards equaling one ballot. So remember from optical scan world a few years ago where every voter got 2 17-inch cards in the general election because of all the long amendments. That's basically the same theory as these. You can be given multiple cards. But you'll notice that when we put this into our system, so I'm going to just slide up and down here, and so now I'm going to line myself right up there. It looks like I'm going to, well, I mean, this card's already got a lot of holes punched in it, but so now we're going to punch a hole in here for Pete Smith. It just makes that little click, and then when I pull it out, boom, we've got a nice clean cut there in that race for that person. So again, these cards, just like Palm Beach's cards, went into one of those ballot boxes. They all got sealed. They all came back to a central count facility. This election here, 96, now of course this is a primary, but in 96 that was the last election that we used this equipment in. So we bought it in 91, 92 time frame. The first election we would have used it in would have been 92. Of course, it predates me coming to the office. But Pat Holleran inherited the big lever machines we're going to look at next. She converted to punch cards, and then before the crisis with the punch card systems became what it became in 2000, we had already moved on and converted to the optical scan system.
So these didn't have as long a life use in Okaloosa County as the newer stuff that scans stuff.
Well, and one of the things that led to this one going away was a massive failure in the courthouse where the big machine was that tabulated all of those cards. I heard many stories from Pat and even from other canvassing board members at the time about lightning, and it struck and it zapped the machine, and they had to restart all the tabulation over again, and they were there until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning running cards from all the different precincts. And back then, you know, you had the stacks of ballots, and you would, after you tabulated a pile of them, you would run a colored marker down the side of them to stripe them so that you knew what got counted and what didn't. And they ended up with piles of ballots with all kinds of different color stripes going all different ways. And they were able to get it all done eventually. But she was like, man, there's got to be a better way to do it than this. And of course, a precinct-based tabulation system with the optical scan is what we settled on, just ahead of the controversy everybody else had.
Right. But then there was probably no way to know which precinct the card came from except when it came in a certain bag, and you would tabulate that precinct, right?
Well, I mean, you can see down here that there are a few places of numbers on it. So my presumption would be here you can see this is an RO2, so you would probably have a way of knowing which ballot style came from which precinct. Okay. Which we still use some of that same terminology on our optical scan cards. You look in the upper right hand or upper left hand corner, you'll see markings with certainly the ballot style, like, you know, in a general election, they're all G's, G01, G02. And for us, the 01, 02 indicates what precinct you're in. So, I mean, I know looking at a ballot, certainly at a glance now, what precinct that card belongs to.
Well, now we're going back to the first voting machines I remember seeing were these lever machines. They're made by a company called Shoop Voting Machine Company, and you've even got a manual there for this baby. And they were headquartered out of New York, New York. That should have made it suspect in the very beginning to some people.
And the factory in Canton, Ohio, which oddly enough is where the Diebold Corporation headquarters ended up being years later. So kind of odd that you end up sort of coming full circle on some of this. But yep. So this is the old Shoop machines. This one is still configured for the last election we used them in, which was the general election in 1990. So that was the last time we rolled these babies out. This entire warehouse floor out here, all of the empty space now that's full of machines, all of these bins behind us that are used for storing, in some cases, stuff from other departments in the county. You'll still find markings on the floor where aisle upon aisle upon aisle of these machines were all laid out, because essentially every one of these machines was a ballot style. So if you had multiple ballot styles in a precinct, you had multiple machines for those. So in a primary, you had a machine for Republicans and a machine for Democrats, which is why you'll notice
before the universal election law.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Which is why you'll notice here the legal time limit is 5 minutes, because you've got a line of people waiting to use this booth on election day, and you know there may only be 1 or 2 booths for the more populous ballot styles and only 1 booth for the less populous ballot styles, and so they didn't want you in there dilly-dallying. You had to get in, vote, and get out.
And there was a lever you would pull to open the curtain somewhere, and that would be what would make the vote count.
Well, so in this version, so that's a different version of a different machine. They had the big red handle. It was inside. You pulled that lever. In this version, the poll worker on this side over here, there's a knob that's pulled out.
Yeah.
That knob would be pulled out to make the machine ready for you. You would walk in and flip this red lever up here. That would close the curtain.
Okay.
And then you made your selections, and as you drop the levers, it would put little X's next to your choices. Okay. And then when you were done, you would flip the lever back, and it would automatically open the curtains for you, and you'd be ready to go. And it would roll the counters over, and you can see under each one of the candidates and choices, there's a little window that right now has a gray piece of metal over it. It's because it's set for voting, so you don't see when you're in there voting how many people ahead of you have voted for somebody or for or against an issue. And you can see some names in here that you probably recognize. Terry Ketchel, when he ran for representative in Congress, there at the top. You can see over in the Bull Rigdon there under the county commission seat, Bill Peebles. So there's a lot of names some of us are familiar with for political history here in our county and in our area. Robert Hardin and all kinds of folks up there that everybody recognizes. So, but these, to program these was the ballot itself was pretty easy because it's just slips of paper. The whole front of this part comes off, and you create the slips of paper. Somebody's got to take a little X-Acto knife and cut the little windows out, but then you just drop them in and you're ready to go. That's the easy part. The hard part is when you come over here, and I've got another machine over here that is set up in the back, and so you have to know, with all this different stuff, every one of these represents a lever on the other side. You have these handy little deals here, so if you've got a lever here that is meant to be a title and it isn't going to be an active lever, you've actually got to take one of these little things and shove it in there.
Okay.
I learned how to program these a long time ago, but I don't want to. So you would snap one of those little things in place. So now that lever is deactivated and can't be used on the other side. So there's a lot of labor-intensive work programming these machines and testing them to make sure that what the paper on the front said matched what you did with the levers on the back side. And of course, maintaining these machines was highly important, making sure they stayed greased and oiled, because if you didn't, when that lever flipped, the counter may or may not click over, but you, the voter, don't get to see whether it did or didn't because you can't see the little counters. So I always kind of laugh a little bit because everyone was all bent out of shape in 2000 about the recounts being done in Florida, And then, of course, when the touch screens became used in some of the large counties without a paper trail, everyone said, oh my gosh, what are we supposed to recount if there's a recount? And all I could say was, what did you recount when you had a recount with one of these, maybe with one of these machines? All a recount consisted of then was going back and looking to make sure you wrote down the numbers right, and that you added the numbers up right. And that's all a recount was back then. There wasn't any paper trail to these, certainly, except for, as you noted before, how did people vote write-ins? If you had a write-in, there would be a window open on the front, and you can see here in the back that there was a roll of paper that it would roll over. So if somebody executed a write-in, it would wrap it up on a piece of paper, and then to count write-ins, you'd have to remove that whole roll of paper and roll it all out and count the write-ins by hand.
And again, same thing with this. Somebody had to physically go through and call out, and somebody had to write down each vote from each for every race from the machine at the end of the day.
That's correct. And so, and again, these machines took weeks to deliver all of them out to all the polling places. A lot of folks here locally. I know Pat used to employ, and I still employ, a lot of firefighters for extra labor here in the polling place. I know previous supervisors employed a lot of people from the sheriff's department. So I've talked to tons of people who are like, I remember delivering those big heavy machines out all over the place for Miss Garrett years and years ago.
At least we don't have to deal with that part anymore. Well, Paul, we've had an interesting tour of this set of machines, and I guess that coming up November the 8th will be the second time you've used your newest system.
Actually, it'll be the third, because we used it in March, we used it in August, so this will be our third go-around with the new ES&S equipment. So we have, over the years, run the gamut of the Shoup Corporation, Data Vote, Global, which became Diebold, which changed its name to Premier, which got bought by ES&S and divested to Dominion, and now we're with ES&S proper.
And in case I think you mentioned that if you had one of your machines that counts the ballots go bad, you've still got that ballot in that box, and that, or what's inside there, can be brought to another place and be counted.
Exactly. And so a lot of people right now are hearing all the news stories about Russian hackers and are our voting systems secure. And the reality is, here in our county, number one, the security behind the memory sticks and the communications from our machines to our servers, only the specially keyed memory sticks that we use are allowed to talk to our servers. It will deny communication from any other outside source. At the end of the day, if we weren't able to make that communication, we can hand carry the memory sticks in, and really at the end of, if there's any concern about the tabulation being accurate, we always have the paper ballots to refer back to.
And you can't really hack into coming into that thing that doesn't get turned on until after you close the machine, as far as your wireless signal back. Well, and the only place you got to deal with is in Blackman. I think you still have to roll the machine out on the front yard.
We have to wheel it outside until they get enough of a signal that they can transmit it, because it's only sending data. It's a very short burst of information. I mean, think about how long it takes your smartphone to download an email, even one that's like maybe got a PDF attachment on it, and it's like, boom, 2 seconds later and you've got the PDF. And that's kind of how fast that equipment will work. Like I said, except for some of the remote areas where sometimes they're wheeling them around looking at the antenna display to make sure they get a good signal before they hit the send button. But by and large, it works really, really well, and even Blackman this last time was able to transmit without any trouble.
Paul, we appreciate our tour through the museum here today.
Absolutely, always welcome. And you know, I'm a history junkie and a political junkie, so this is I love setting up stuff like this and going back through the mists of time and looking at some of this stuff a second time.